What I want to try and do is help you understand what it takes to develop a large building company. I think we underestimate the challenge that's involved in developing a successful construction business. How old are you going to be before you start to experience life like you want it? I want to tell you right now, whether you like it or not, there is a better way to do business. Hi everyone, welcome to the Business for Builders podcast. My name's Max. I'm the CEO at Smith & Sons Remodeling Experts here in Canada. And welcome to you if you're in YouTube land. Welcome to you if you're with us here in TikTok Live that we've got happening as well. And this episode is going to be awesome. Talk about give value. Literally, this is going to... I hope you've got a hell of a drive in front of you, because this episode, I think, is going to be a bit of a standout. So it is our 101st episode. So pretty excited about going and getting another 100 under our belts here at Business for Builders. As usual, housekeeping, if you're on YouTube, follow and subscribe and hit the bell and all that sort of wonderful stuff. And certainly share the information if you know someone that could benefit from it. And certainly don't forget about giving us a bit of a pat in the back on the podcast reviews if you're getting a kick out of whatever it is we're sharing that resonates with you. Don't forget, I can be contacted at max@businessforbuilders.ca. If you've got a question, one question at a time, hit me with it and I'll get back to you as promptly as I can. All right, today on this episode, this 101st episode, I'm going to talk about, I basically titled this thing, Feed the Golden Goose. And the reason is it's a bit of a term that I use a little bit because we all know that when we feed the golden goose, it lays the golden egg. That's the plan anyway. But what I also see is that a lot of GCs really get into the building. I got into the building industry literally just, do I call it a fluke? Do I call it luck? It certainly wasn't a plan, that's for sure. And then what happens is we just evolve, life goes on and, our lives get busier personally, and then that may put back pressure on us financially. So we're like, I've got to make more money. Or you might be a hungry entrepreneur and you have been trying to make money since you were born anyway. And so you're in the building game and you're sort of wanting to maximize your return on your investment time-wise and financially. And so, what happens is, what I see a lot of is that we start to hit a ceiling. And it's really got to do with, and you've heard me say this before, the more you learn, the more you earn. Your attitude determines your altitude, all those kind of philosophies. And what happens is we get so busy that we almost forget to pay attention to, our own personal development as far as a business owner is concerned. And so what happens is most of us business owners, and I'll assume I'm talking, predominantly I talk to general contractors, but if you're a subcontractor or you're wanting to get into the construction game, these are things you can be aware of. But what happens is most general contractors end up doing everything. And, and that's fair enough, in a startup, right? If you're in a startup contracting, and there's a lot of our audience that is like, I'm 18, I'm 20, I'm 22, I've just finished an apprenticeship, or I'm about to finish an apprenticeship and I'm going to get into it. And they're in such the early days that you've got no choice, probably mostly to do with limited capital. So you have to do everything yourself. So that's a typical startup phase. I know when I got the gig to, launch Smith & Sons in this country here in Canada, I was the guy. It was just me. And I was working in conjunction with my business partners overseas. They were helping me out with a little bit of stuff there. But predominantly, I was Johnny on the spot and had to basically, go and start spreading the gospel as it related to, franchising in the construction sector. So I understand what a startup looks like. Now, fast forward 4 or 5 years, I'm sitting here, I've got 5 staff in the house. They all handle different departments and, obviously report back to me. And that allows me a lot of freedom to get into some innovation and creativity as it relates to developing the business. So this is where what you want to do is, if you want to develop a business, you've got to move out of the startup phase at some point. I've seen guys that are in the business for 15, 20 years and still in the startup phase where they're doing everything. Now, if they're happy doing that, kudos to them. That's fine. Mazel tov. I'm not beating you up on that. That's fine. That's your choice. But what I'm doing is I'm talking to those that are business-minded that complain about being in the same space 10 or 15 years in and are blaming everybody else for their lack of success. They're the guys and gals that I want to talk to. And so, I think it comes down to a lot of it, we get trained that, or whether it's subliminal or whatever it is, but we think that if we're the cheapest price, we'll get the job. And obviously, in truth, as far as if you're a customer, well, if I can get the cheapest price, then I will go with that, tradesperson or that builder. The problem with that is you've turned yourself from a service-oriented business to a commodity, just like a can of Monster or a can of Coke. That means if you go down the road, the next guy might sell it cheaper. That's a commodity. We're not a commodity because my experience in the building game, your experience in the building game is remarkably different. Our perception and our understanding of how things get demolished and rebuilt, or, new homes get built, and the way you go about that is completely different. Therefore, the prices that we come up with, and that's why some homeowners think that if I get 3 quotes for a renovation, I can then figure out which guy I'm going to choose. Actually, it compounds the confusion. That's what it does, because we're all so different in our approach to a lot of the projects that we do. So, I think we've got to have a mental shift, and I've talked about having a paradigm shift. In other words, you see things the way they are because that's just how you grew up, or that's what you were taught, or that's the thought process, or that was the chit-chat around, the dining room table when you're working for your dad in the construction game. And you basically start to use that as this is my identity. And what I'm saying is that, firstly, competing on price is a dead man's game. We don't do that. If you want to develop a business and you think that competing on price is legit, then you're kidding yourself. What you've got to start doing is now thinking about that what we quote is at the market rate. You've got to understand that we are not gouging. We don't have a monopoly. We don't have the ability to, overreach as far as the price is concerned. We have to be competitive to some extent. However, what I find mostly is that everyone is basically undercooking their pricing. So we've got to be able to, quote at the market rate. So you need to establish essentially what your business needs to survive. Now, if your business is way too top heavy and you've got too many staff on and you've got too many rolling stock, too many vehicles, you've got all kinds of overheads that are unnecessary, then charging clients more money is not going to fix your shit. What you've got to do is you've got to start culling some of the dead weight, some of the things that you actually don't need. It's just, I wanted that. And then really sort of, jettisoning anything that is not necessary to your survival. And so in some cases I've spoken to guys and I said, look, you have the ability to do everything within your business. You need to go back to the startup phase, lighten the load financially, and attack it again. So it's a slight pivot. It is a couple of backward steps, but it's all about our survival right now, guys and girls. And it is brutal. It's a brutal game, and it will not give you any second chances. Because ultimately what we want to do is, to make money we want to generate operational capital. If your business is not making money, then how on earth can you invest back in the business to grow the business? And a lot of the time, I've said this before, when you go and bring on a new staff member or you pay for some more equipment or whatever, you spend that money and you drop below zero, and it takes a little bit of time for you to actually reap the benefit of having that new team member or that new piece of equipment. So understand that's part of the deal. So we've got to be careful that we don't overvalue the price indication from clients. Homeowners or clients can be liars. I know that sounds a little bit harsh, but they're doing what you and I would do. We would just keep our cards close to the chest. We don't want to give up too much territory straight away. We want to get to know the individual, the person who's selling to us, i.e. you, the builder. And then over time, you build rapport and trust, and you deconstruct the wall of distrust, which is going to help you really, get to that point where they see the value in you. They understand why you're pricing it at the point that you're pricing it at, and hopefully you can do some more deals. So a good question that I ask clients when they sort of say to me, well, Max, I think I should get a bathroom renovated for 12 grand. I always just ask them, well, what research did you do to come up with that? And more often than not, it's going to be fairly flimsy at best. All right, let's get into it. Look, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to present you with a new concept. Okay, for me, I was a carpenter by trade, did my time between 89 and 93. Then I got my builder's license in 2009. And, obviously we call ourselves builders, general contractors, carpenters, whatever the case may be. What I want you to I don't need you to change your status profile or your title or whatever, but what I want you to understand as a principle or a fundamental is that you're actually a general manager. And I'm going to dig a little bit deep. So I just want you to take a bit of a different perspective on, that term general manager. And I guess I had worked for some larger corporate companies where the general manager was an employed person. He wasn't a director or an owner or anything like that, or a managing partner. He was actually just an employed general manager. And so I was thinking about this as I was preparing this morning. And I just thought that I want you to take I want you to sort of step sideways or just go to a different position and look at you and your business. And I'm going to share with you some things I think where it's going to bring some clarity around the amount of responsibility and obligation that you have as an owner of a building company, right? So here's the definition of a general manager, right? You'll love this. Really short and sweet. Responsible for improving efficiency, increasing profits whilst maintaining operations. Okay, so responsible for improving efficiency and increasing profits whilst maintaining or managing operations. So the responsibility is far and wide. As a carpenter, all I had to do was show up on time, do what I was told to do, knock nails into wood, make sure everything was plumb square and straight, and at 5 o'clock, pack my shit up, I go home, and at the end of the week, I get a paycheck. Like, super simple. Some days I think to myself, I would love to go back to that way of life. But being entrepreneurial, I probably wouldn't last. So anyway, so that description of a general manager's role really is a good starting point when you start thinking about your business. Now, what I'm going to do is I've literally got, and I don't want to blow you sideways, but I've got 10 departments, and there's probably more. I'm not saying this is totally exhausting or exhaustive. There could be some more in there, and feel free to drop us a line if you've got a couple of others. I'm not going to dive into these each individually in too much depth for the sake of time. And then I've got some points to wrap up, because what I want to try and do is help you understand what it takes to develop a large building company. I think we underestimate the challenge that's involved in developing a successful construction business. And so, as I go through here, I might even twig on a few others that I've missed out on. But, so I'm going to run through 10 of these departments. And, as I go through them, I'll probably just briefly chat about, what each of them do. And what some of their responsibilities are. And over the next sort of 10 or 15 minutes, you'll start to get a really good view on the landscape of a construction company and what it really takes to manage that. And you as the general manager and the owner, a lot of this relies on you. And you'll understand why you've got to move. If you are going to have a large company, that you'll understand almost this really highlights, said scope of work or roles and responsibilities within the company. In some cases, some team members might be able to do a couple of these. You might be able to group those shots. But when I'm talking about 10 aspects of your business, if you want to develop a high-performance building company, you could choke on a lot of this. And then you'll start to realize you'll get some perspective, and you'll go, okay, now I understand the amount of responsibility and roles that it takes. I might just be, happy with, if I'm a one-man band, to be happy with $250,000 or $350,000 worth of sales per year and just stay on that, because I don't want to take it to the next level. People always say to me, I want to take my building company to the next level. I honestly believe they just don't have a clue. It's like, I want to go to 40,000 feet, but I don't want to wind the window up. What you don't understand is there's no oxygen up there, so this, and it's cold as, so sometimes I think we have these lofty goals, and I'm not against that, because one of my last points is to dream big. I get that. But you got to understand that, and that's to my other point to close out, you've got to have a good relationship with pain as well. And so, but let's get started. Let's talk about 10 departments. The first one that I've got here is business development manager. And that's something that I never hear general contractors. None of them have ever said, they're interested in knowing more about business development. All they want to do is make more money. But really what business development comes down to is two things: systemization and innovation. What happens is we understand that we walk a mile, we see a mile. We're almost like building the plane on the airstrip. As we go down the runway to take off, we're sort of putting this whole thing together. Which is not bad, but you really, got to make sure that you understand, what it is that you're doing. So systemization, you've heard me talk about systems. Businesses operate off the back of really good systems, and systems are operated by, really good human beings. So, note there, and we'll get down to human resource management later, but, you've got to be a good talent scout, and you've got to be able to put together a really good company culture that's, productive, that's encouraging, that's, not self-serving, that's very much outwardly focused, where members of your team have got a good balance between ego and humility, all that sort of thing. So that's systemization, because if you systemize and you get the right humans, all of a sudden there's a potential for you to have a really rock and roll business. So, and then innovation, like every day, I talk to myself, and I'm like, even this morning, I'm like, what can I do for my team of general contractors And I'm not talking about probably anything construction. I'm more talking around, the design and quoting phase. How can we streamline it? How can we create lower friction interaction with clients? Even how do I systemize an approach where I can help my builders understand when they're basically, they're too deep with inquiry. There's certain cracks starting to appear. How can I do an assessment and then produce reports and then make recommendations? That's usually my system. I assess what's happening in businesses. I'll make reports, and within those reports will contain, some recommendations about what I, think should happen going forward, both in the short term, mid-term, and long term. So this is really, I guess, to a certain extent, my role, even as CEO of Smith & Sons. I guess I have a bit of a biz dev role with a lot of our general contractors. We certainly do talk a lot about some of the pain they're going through, some of the wins that they're having as well. What are the challenges they're facing? And sort of, so there is there's a business development consult role, a borderline coach, I suppose, is in there as well. So again, when we're talking about, developing building companies that are high performance, there's a lot that I guess this whole Smith & Sons general contracting franchise opportunity business in a box, one of the I think integral parts is to be able to sort of, chat within a group, of general contractors or have someone like myself who's been in the game for over 30 years that can just be a soundboard. And a lot of the time I just ask a few questions and I hear my guys just thrashing stuff out, and they hear themselves talk, and they really start to figure out in their minds what the right direction is. And, it's just a brilliant thing when I see that sort of stuff happening. So systemization and innovation is part of the biz dev manager's role. Point number 2, marketing manager. So these are either going to be, what I'm talking about here is these departments are either going to be managers or administrators, one of the two. And so point number 2 or department number 2 is marketing manager. Certainly, massive. I would almost put there a community manager as well, because obviously we're talking about marketing, we're talking about content production, we're talking about operating on several different, social or digital platforms. We're talking about even considering some print media, things like that, understanding or defining what the mandate of the company is. What is the mission? What is the purpose? What's the end goal? How is it that we are separating ourselves from our competitors? What is our competitive advantage? How are we making sure that we're not just another tree in the forest? Is our marketing message, just vanilla, or does it actually bring value? And so those are the kinds of things when you're and understand what I'm going through is when I get to the bottom of these 10, this Mr. or Mrs. General Contractor or Miss General Contractor or whatever the case may be, you have to keep your eye on all of these balls up in the air. This is what you have to juggle. And now, obviously I'm saying to you, do that, but you can't do that indefinitely. That is not sustainable. You will not be able to develop a business, period. What it means is now this goes back, you've got to develop the capital to give you the ability to recruit good talent. That means you've got to have a systemized approach to recruitment. You've got to understand the costs involved. You've got to understand that there's always going to be a little of initial deficit before you start to see some positive ROI. This is a game. It's a juggling act on, biblical proportions. It's massive. And so when I get done here, you'll be sweating bullets because you'll be like, I kind of knew it. I just no one's ever broken it down into a 10-point list where I've been able to sort of, and then pull that thing apart and really understood. So, marketing managers got some responsibilities because really, if you don't get that right, your phone's not going to ring. You've got no chance. Understand this, that your marketing is tied to your profit or your profit margin, I should say. And so, a lot of building companies will probably, either withdraw from the marketing side of things when maybe work gets tight or whatever. And really that is counterproductive. We very rarely, if ever, cease marketing at some level, even in the tough times or in the slow times. And I know we've just come back, kids are back at school, but, we had the summer holidays here and, the lead gen does drop off a little bit. And so the guys, out there, they're used to getting a really, good level of inquiry. And sometimes even for us with our marketing prowess, sometimes we don't kick goals. Sometimes we have no idea. We can't go out there and make people call us. But it's understanding the patterns of humanity within your ecosystem. And we know this, elections and school holidays will always, and those seasonal things like Christmas will always put a bit of a hole in our lead generation because nobody wants to talk to general contractors then, which is fair enough. So, I try and educate our guys around, we are still doing marketing, we are still doing branding. We probably revert a little bit back to branding more so than lead gen and call to action, but it's still out there. So what, this is me giving you some insight from, what I do as CEO with my corporate staff here, but also with my general contractors and what we do on behalf of our general contractors. And so hopefully this will give you some, understanding of what your responsibilities are when it comes to maximizing your profits in your company, but also keeping a handle on, operating and moving the company forward on a day-to-day basis as well. Right, department number 3, sales manager. Ultimately when leads come in, someone's got to oversee that. Now, there's a part of me, again, that where I operate as a sales manager for all my general contractors. We do get call. All of the calls come to our call center here in British Columbia, and we dispatch those to our general contractors up and down the Okanagan Valley, on the island, in Edmonton. And it's part of our role to then follow up to make sure that that clients are being connected with or contacted. And then certainly on the odd occasion, we will get a call from a client to say that one of our builders maybe didn't show up for the meeting, which is unfortunate, but these guys are human and they're not perfect. So there is that sales management backup. So you're your own sales manager. You're gonna take the phone calls. You've got to have that initial discussion on the phone. You're going to go and do the first meeting. You're going to have to really document your sales process. You might be in charge of writing all your scripts. You might be in charge of making sure that you're correlating the data from those sales meetings, clearly and competently. And so everything really, and so as I go through these 10 departments, understand this, that when I start talking about documenting a sales process, you got to understand that we do that because we train, general contractors. If you're going to have someone who's maybe a project consultant to handle the sales side of things, then they're not going to be able to absorb the information from you through osmosis, right? You're going to have to have a playbook. Right, you're going to have an operations file. You're going to need to have a manual. You're going to need to have something that they can take away and study and understand what it is that the process looks like. And so, again, that's time to sit down, Word documents, flow charts, checklists. Like it's a lot, and that's part of your role as a general manager to make sure those systems are put in place and that they're ready to go for new people that come in. Next one, department number 4. Estimating and quoting manager. Obviously, if you go out and do the sales manager, you go and do the sales call, you're the one who's got to come in and give the client that estimated price range or give them a bit of a ballpark, maybe, explain to them in dot point what they're getting, talk about some of the challenges they might face, really brief to understand, a bit about their project, where the pricing lays, and then, of course, for you, the builder, to qualify, this inquiry to see whether or not it's a go or a no-go. And so, again, that's the client interface at that point, and then you've got to sit down and go, right, how am I going to estimate? Because I've said this before, profit's a natural byproduct of good estimating. So what checklist do you have in place to ensure that you don't leave anything out of the project? I've talked about, one of the largest projects I ever contracted on myself with my company was, a $1.1 million 5-plex. And my estimator, who was a buddy of mine, he'd worked with me on the tools as a carpenter, really good guy, second generation carpenter. He come to me cap in hand and said, I've omitted all of the ceramic tiles for five townhouses. So, back then I would say that I didn't have a proper checklist for Jace to look into. And so essentially it's my fault. I'm the boss guy, I'm the leader, I'm the general manager. All of that, fault falls on my shoulders. Now, off the back of that, you turn and you go, okay, I'm going to accept that the problem lays with me. As the estimating and quoting manager, I am now going to sit down on the weekend and I'm going to develop a fairly coherent or competent checklist for estimating to ensure that this doesn't happen again. And then we can use that document to actually sit down together and go through that project top to toe in fairly quick time to assess or to confirm that we've got everything accounted for, another set of eyes. And so, again, for you as an individual, if you've got no business coach and, you don't have anybody in your corner, like someone with some previous experience, then you've got to go and look into ways to get checklists together for you to be able to double check with yourself, because you're not like one of my general contractors, had a call yesterday. There was a bit of a client dispute and, one of my GCs rang me up and said, I just want to run this by you. I've got a bit of an idea which way I'm going to go with it. And we had a good conversation. Again, it was just bouncing off ideas and, and then I put in my 2 bobs worth and we come to a conclusion that with 2 weeks to go on the project, this is going to be the best way forward. And so those kinds of, communication methodologies is super important. And so as an estimating and quoting manager, you've got to bulletproof your estimating process, and you're in charge of that. That's another scope of work or department that you've got to head up and handle. Department number 5, contract administration. So you've been out there, you've done your sales thing, you've done your estimating and quoting, you've got an agreement in principle. Now it's time to draw up contracts. So that's you. So even before you have that document in hand, you've got to have that document drawn up. Now, in some cases, I've shook hands with a bunch of builders in this town, and they don't have a piece of paper. It's literally a handshake, which is super scary. If everything goes well, great. But if it doesn't go great, the first question your lawyer's going to ask for is paperwork. So even if you go to a small arbitration or a small claims court, you're going to need to have all kinds of supporting documentation to argue your point. So I would suggest that you don't go and build anything going forward until you've got some sort of agreement. Have a chat to your lawyer about that. I know the one that we've got that all of our GCs use costs us between $2,500 and $3,000. A worthy investment, and that will obviously be reviewed on a, probably on a every other year, every second year. We'll probably take a look at that and make sure that there's no upgrades that we need to do on that. So you are the contract administrator. Obviously, further to that, you've got to figure out, in the case that there is a dispute, you've got to know the contents, what the contents of your contract has. You've got to be familiar with that, because in the event that there is a dispute, you've got to know where you're going to fall back on. And you've got to understand all of the different clauses and the different conditions within your contract. So you are the contract administrator as well. Okay, department number 6, project manager. This is the one we're probably a little bit more familiar with. Obviously dealing with subs and suppliers and project scheduling and things like that. That's pretty straightforward. Again, it's another role you have to do. So understand, as I'm running through this, if you just had one job on the go, fair chance you're going to be able to actually do all of these, what I would call in series, because you're not running multiple projects or inquiries in parallel. So you're going to be able to handle this as a one-man band. But if you want to build $1 million plus company, then to do all of this, you're going to struggle. You're not going to be sleeping much, put it that way. So the project management is pretty straightforward. Making sure quality control happens on building sites, making sure that jobs are being done on time, making sure that any delays that happen, you basically deal with that sub or that supplier, relay information to the clients through your contract administration role in the way of a change order if there's a delay, and go from there. So that's project management. So which brings me to client relationship management, both from the first phone call right to your post-construction warranty period. You're the one who's going to get all those phone calls. You're the one that's going to get asked the questions throughout the project build. You're going to be the one who's going to be criticised because the job's going too slow. You're the one that's going to be being accused of maybe not prioritising their project. I've heard that before. Matter of fact, it's quite common for every single one of your clients to think that their job is being pushed to the bottom, which you and I both know that that's BS. We never ever, we might prioritize because of materials or whatever, or we might have to, because of postponements or delays, we can actually turn our attention to other jobs which are operational. But odds on is, if the client feels that way, you're the client relationship manager, so you're going to get those phone calls as well. All right, number 8, finance administrator. You're in charge of accounts payable, accounts receivable. You're in charge of work in progress accounting. You're in charge of back costing or cost engineering or cost analysis, comparing your actual spend to your budget spend. You're in charge of ensuring that your GST is up to date. You're in charge of ensuring that your profitability level is there and you understand your level of liability. You are going to be the one that needs to be able to sort of liaise with both bookkeepers throughout the year and then, of course, accountants at the end of the year. You're the one who's going to need to be able to account for every dime that's passed through your books. If the the taxation or the taxation department in your country, if they've got any questions, they're coming to you. So again, that's a biggie because really, okay, sales cures everything, but if you're not selling enough projects at the acceptable level, at what I'd call the market rate, you're not creating operational capital, you're certainly going to find yourself really, I guess, in a point of getting squeezed, I would say. A bit of a challenge. Just a side note on finance while we're quickly chatting about that. I was talking to my finance administrator yesterday, and we want to make sure that our guys, you should have, this might be an eye-opener. You might be already doing this. If you're doing this, great. These are the 4 bank accounts that I expect, or the 4 bank accounts that I expect our general contractors to open. The first one is an operational checking account. That's the first one. The second one that I want opened up is a designated tax account. So for the collection of, or the allocation of potentially a typical income tax as well as your GST. The third one is a credit card account if you're not running commercial accounts. But for some basic, business operation costs, a credit card's good to have. So not your personal credit card, a credit card that's attached to your operating account, your checking account. And then the fourth one, which is actually not associated with the business, is your personal account. You need to be showing that you're paying yourself a salary. It's got to go from the company account across to your personal account, because you and the company aren't the same thing. Yes, you might be the director. Yes, you're probably a shareholder as well. But you've got to make sure that there is a specific way that you're being paid, because that will help you in your financial analysis. If you are not paying yourself or you're not paying yourself enough, that tells me that you're probably underbidding your jobs and you're leaving money on the table. And conversely, you've got to make sure that you're not stealing from yourself and not overpaying yourself and putting too much pressure on the company to generate profits. I've seen a bit of that as well. So that was department number 8, finance administrator. And we talked a little bit about this one. Department number 9, you are the dispute resolution manager. Obviously, the shit hits the fan and there's some discussions around why clients aren't happy, or if they've got questions as it relates to quality or any hang-ups that they might have. You're going to be the guy or girl that's got to handle that. And that is super challenging, especially if you're at the back end of the project. But ultimately, that challenge falls on your shoulders as well. And there's really, that just needs all of the finesse and all of the massage that you've got within your being, because I know you want to go guns blazing with, I've got this contract and it says in the specifications, but sometimes it needs a bit of finesse, and sometimes you might just eat crow a little bit, because especially if you're close to the end of the project, all you want to do is get their project finished for them. You want to get paid, what you're owed, and you basically want to close the book on that, project, and, learn from it if that's the case, except that there might have been some things that you could have done better, and that's definitely par for the course. And department number 10, which you're responsible for, is human resource management. Obviously, to run recruitment programs, to do the interviews, to understand how you're going to write certain ads. We use Indeed here a little bit, and be able to be able to sort out the goes from the no goes. Are you going to do it quickly, or is the interview process going to be quite elongated? Is it you're going to make sure there's plenty of hoops to jump through, or are you the type that just says, look, just jump on the tools. We'll give you a week, see how we go, and then we'll do a quick assessment after that, whichever is your thing. But ultimately, you're the one responsible for hiring and firing. Further to that, you're going to need an employment agreement in place. You can use some sort of cloud-based or online service, with a small subscription per year to get some of those legal documents sorted out, but chat to your legal counsel about that, what is best. And like I said, you better be familiar with how to do payroll. In this country, it's called source deductions. Are you going to, produce or provide extended medical? How are you going to go for a probation period? Is it 90 days? Is it 30 days? What's that going to be? What are the entitlements at the end of 90 days? How does that change? What's your review process? And all those sorts of considerations you have to make ultimately are part of your responsibility as the general manager. So, look, I think if you're going to build $1 million plus business, I would definitely state for the record that that's way too many hats for one person to wear. I probably believe as well that even if you're a husband and wife, or you've got your significant other or life partner in the business, that's a hell of a challenge for both of you to manage as well. So again, it's like, what makes life easier is having some human resource, but you've got to pay that person. They can't live off, bottle tops and peanuts. So, and if you pay peanuts, you get monkeys. And so, you've got to really understand the power of, if doing business right, the positive effect. But odds on is, you're going to have to be patient. So, dive into that list again and really maybe just analyze those different departments within your business and how much time you need to spend in each of those departments. And, I think considering your business goals is definitely going to help you ascertain whether or not you need one or more humans to help you in the driving or the operation of the business. And then, of course, if you want to go big, then obviously you're going to have to staff up, which is going to take a shit ton of operational capital. So hope that helps. If you've got any questions, hit me up, max@businessforbuilders.ca. Like and subscribe, hit the bell, all that sort of wonderful stuff. Leave us a comment on the podcast. Give us some daps, pat on the back, 5 stars, all that kind of wonderful stuff. We'll see you on the next episode. Go and build a kick-ass business. See you later.